What's up, Barnhill family, and welcome back to your home for all things combat sports.
Yo.
So, Nick, the BMF belt was made for Jorge Masvidal, but I cannot think of a more fitting owner of the belt currently than Justin the Human Highlight Gaethje. What a brilliant performance last night. Exacted his revenge on Dustin Poirier. He looked really good in there, super sharp, waited for his moment, and got the knockout that Salt Lake City was waiting for all night long.
Yeah, and so many things about the BMF just work for me, and I'm a big fan of this. Anytime you've got an opportunity for somebody to go out there and main event a UFC pay-per-view, even if it's not for an undisputed title, that's meaningful. And now we're talking about a belt that, even though it's a bit more gimmicky, if you will, it is more rare than a UFC belt, and not anybody can get it. And the crazy thing about it is, if Justin Gaethje fights for the UFC belt next, is the BMF belt even up for grabs? I think there's some sort of criteria where obviously Islam Makhachev and Charles Oliveira are considered BMFs amongst the sport, but the fans kind of have to get behind it if they're going to bring that belt back in. So I find it to be one of those rare things that I really enjoy, and I'm glad it's back out there. Now, I know Jorge Masvidal would have loved to have wrapped it around his teammate Dustin Poirier, and they would have been able to keep the BMF lineage inside of American Top Team. But when you're going in there against Justin Gaethje, there's really no knowing what's going to happen, and I think that's ultimately what made this fight so entertaining. Dustin Poirier said there was butterflies in his stomach all camp. Justin Gaethje said every time he gets ready for a fight, he's got that same feeling, especially when you go against somebody that's already beaten you. So I think these guys absolutely lived up to the BMF title. I think they gave us the fight that we wanted to see. I wish it would have lasted a little bit longer, but when you zig when you're supposed to zag in the second round against Justin Gaethje, you might just wind up flat on the canvas.
Yeah, and it's funny because Justin has said that he's felt those nerves going into a fight before, but for whatever reason, last night, he said from walkout to being in the octagon, I just felt calm and prepared, and that goes to show you how tough he is mentally, because you're in there with a guy who is a certified BMF contender in Dustin Poirier.
Who's beaten you before.
Exactly, who has knocked you out before or finished you before, technical knockout. And you got to go in there and try to exact your revenge against them. And usually in rematches, it's kind of a repeat of what happened the first time. Now, lately, obviously, with Izzy and Alex and some others, that has not been the case. But most of the time, historically, if they beat you once, they can beat you twice. And Justin was able to do exactly what he needed to do. Now, I got ripped apart in the comments section with regards to Justin Gaethje being able to contend with Dustin in the boxing realm and potentially even have the upper hand as far as the hands are concerned. Now, obviously, he won the fight with a head kick, but up until that point, they were tit for tat, and Justin was landing some beautiful unorthodox combinations which set that head kick up. I think that, the very crisp boxing and the precision of Justin Gaethje, more so now than it was back in 2018, and the elevation itself did play a little bit of a factor. Not to say that Dustin gassed out, but Justin is firing on all cylinders, whether he's at sea level or whether he's 7,000 feet above it, and not many fighters can say that.
Yeah, when he's so used to being up there, it just makes sense for him to take these types of fights at elevation and really shine through when that happens. Dustin Poirier didn't seem to be affected by the elevation, and I think that maybe if the fight dragged on into the 4th and 5th round, we would have seen maybe a bit of a deterioration from Dustin, and we would have seen Justin be able to push the gas a little bit more, but that didn't need to happen. And I know we only got about, 7 minutes of this fight,
give or
and
take.
out of 25, that feels like you get gypped a little bit, but for every second they were in there, they gave us fireworks. And we did say before this fight that we thought it was going to be primarily a boxing match held in an MMA cage with MMA rules, and you got a full gamut of MMA skills on display, right? Both guys were sending kicks. I mean, the finishing sequence was a head kick, but there were so many great boxing moments for both fighters in that first round, and I really loved what Justin was doing. He was staying in range. Both of them were landing their big shots, but also getting out of the way of really big shots from their opponent. Everything about it just screamed, this belongs in the BMF category, right? Justin Gaethje was landing big shots and slipping and moving really well. His footwork, his dynamic angles, all of that stuff was on full display. And while I was like the people in the comment section going after you, I thought Dustin Poirier was just too sharp and too crisp with his hands for anybody like at 155 to catch up to him with the boxing. But Justin Gaethje is making leaps and bounds in his improvement, and I think Trevor Whitman is the perfect guy to be teaching him and growing him with his career. I mean, if you were paying attention to what he said in the corner after the first round, he was like, man, I love this. This is controlled chaos. This is what Justin Gaethje does best. Don't forget you've got a jab in there to help you find your range and help you get inside. But everything that Justin Gaethje and Trevor Whitman have been working on was on full display against Dustin Poirier last night.
Yeah, Trevor's a great coach, and I always love when he's mic'd up because I love his enthusiasm and his advice. With 1 minute's time, he doesn't waste a second. He tells you exactly what you need to hear. He's upbeat. He's a little bit hard on you when he needs to be, and I think he's a great coach. I think he's one of the good guys for sure. And speaking of his camp, how about the lack of awareness by Joe Rogan after the fight? Because he's sitting there talking about all the similarities to how Leon, sent Kamaru Usman into the stratosphere in the same city with the same kick and everything, and all the while there's Kamaru just trying to enjoy the moment with his teammate and having to relive being knocked out in the same arena. So
the guys in the van in the back in the parking lot are sitting there queuing up the Leon Edwards highlight so they can do it literally side by side. And Usman's just standing there probably looking at the screen like, oh God, I'm trying to erase this moment from my mind.
Thanks, Joe.
At least he can be happy for his friend, and Usman's got plenty to be happy about, so I don't think it's bothering him that much.
Yeah, no doubt, and looking forward to what's coming for Justin. Obviously, he could take on the winner of Islam and Charles. His name is certainly going to be in contention for that, as is Volkanovski's. He wants that rematch, especially if Islam is able to beat Charles again. Volk really wants that rematch, so his name is in there as well. But interestingly enough, Conor McGregor, and just like clockwork, if there's a 155 fight that matters at all happening, or even 170 for that matter, Conor's on the proper 12 and he's on the Twitter. Right. And he was very much doing both of those last night. Said that, these guys are nothing to him. He can easily smoke Justin Gaethje and screw Michael Chandler. He wants the Gaethje fight. That's kind of what he alluded to. So look for Justin to maybe take that bait. I think that is a great fight. It's one that we haven't seen before. I think that's an excellent opponent for Conor. Justin obviously would be the favorite going into that, and for good reason, but I think that would be a fireworks fight nonetheless.
Yeah, and a lot of people look at Conor McGregor's, cryptic tweets at late at night when he's watching these fights over in Ireland or wherever he is on the globe as like, oh, he's just trying to, pony himself into a nice big fight or a big main event or a title fight or something like that. And I get that Conor is not on some great winning streak and he probably doesn't deserve a UFC title fight right now. But with the name that he brings and the eyes that he can get onto the fights, it just makes sense for him to be the main event, to be fighting for a belt, to be fighting for something meaningful. And that's another reason why I really do love the BMF being back in circulation. Conor McGregor cannot be anybody but the second to last or the last person to walk out on a UFC pay-per-view. He's just too big of a star. It doesn't make sense for them to put him anywhere else on the card. And that's what makes the BMF belt so intriguing for me. Conor McGregor certainly fits the criteria of a BMF. He's an anytime, anyone, anywhere kind of guy, and he's been a company man for many, many years, and he did a whole lot of heavy lifting on his way to the belt, and then when he went up and became double champ, he's just a historical figure in this sport, and whether you love him or you hate him, or you want to see him win or you want to see him get knocked out, you have to respect what he's done. He's earned a spot on the roster of BMFs, and I think if him and Justin Gaethje get in there and mix it up, you could see a very competitive fight, and I think it'd be fireworks from start to finish.
Yeah, and now Justin has something that Michael Chandler doesn't, which is a belt that's meaningful to Conor. He would love to get that BMF belt. The likelihood of Conor ever becoming an undisputed world champion again, in my personal opinion, is very low. But the likelihood of him getting the BMF belt, I think Justin could win that fight. I think he probably would be favored, and I think he would probably win. But I won't sit here and tell you that Conor can't win that fight. Conor's got a very powerful left hand. Justin does engage in firefights sometimes, and anything can happen. So I think look for Conor to turn his sights towards Justin Gaethje now and away from Michael Chandler. And I think that tide has kind of been shifting in that direction for a couple of months now. And especially now that Gaethje being as big of a name as he is, with a belt that's meaningful to Conor, I think that's the fight he's going to go for.
Yeah, I think the UFC sees the writing on the wall. They see Conor McGregor fighting for a BMF title at the top of a pay-per-view card against Justin Gaethje. Could be one of the biggest fights they've had in many years.
I think so.